Chapter 12, the 4th year of Morois. The spell of the love potion was to last for 3 years. Quote, the mother of Iseult who brewed it, for 3 years of love she made it. So said the poet Beowulf in the first and oldest tale of Tristan and Iseult. It is no mere happenstance that the spell lasts for 3 years. It is no accident that Tristan and Iseult leave the forest of Morois in the 4th year. Numbers are symbols. The number 3 and 4 represent particular stages of consciousness. 4 is a symbol of wholeness, unity, and completion. The 4 elements, the 4 directions, the 4 seasons, the 4 divisions of the mandala, all were universal symbols of the unification of consciousness before historical time began. In dreams and myths, the occurrence of 4, whether 4 objects, 4 people, or time divided into 4, shows that a unification is possible, that the psyche is moving toward a synthesis, or that an evolution is drawing toward completion. A new level of consciousness is possible, if one will pay the price. A new beginning is at hand. By contrast, 3 is the symbol of incompleteness, that stage of consciousness in which we are aware that we are incomplete, that we don't know ourselves, but are unable as yet to solve the riddle of life. 3 is dynamic, never at rest, always searching for the missing element, the unknown 4th member of the quaternity. 3 is the stage in which we are not yet conscious of ourselves as a whole or a totality. We strive and we search, looking for the meaning, the answer, the unseen path to our true selves. 3 becomes 4 by the addition of the missing part of our life, and 4 can become 1, the consciousness of our wholeness and the individuality as fact. We see Blanchefleur languish 3 days after the death of Tristan's father, and on the 4th day, Tristan is born. We hear the Morholt shout 3 times from the islet where Tristan is fighting them. Then his fate is accomplished. We will yet see 3 and 4 repeated many times in our myth, even in the last moment of Tristan's life. For 3 years, Tristan and Iseult abide in the forest of Morois. I'm going with Morois. But in that wood, they live under a spell. We see them living like wild creatures, faces pallid and drawn, clothes torn and ragged from brambles, eating wild game and roots. Yet they are unaware of their hardships, for they are drunk with the magic wine, drunk with the sight of one another, awake only to their mutual dream. The lovers believe Morois to be the whole of life, to be the enchanted orchard. But we who stand watching know that the projections of romance are not the whole of life. They only seem to be. The lovers dwell under the sign of 3, and we know that outside the forest is a wider world. When 3 years have passed, the spell is suddenly broken. The unseen clock of evolution pauses in its slow ticking and strikes the hour. It is the 4th year of Morois. King Mark miraculously walks into their tiny hut. He leaves his sword and his ring as tokens of his law and his love. He calls Tristan back to ordinary human life. He calls Iseult, Tristan's soul, back to her place in the inner world, back to reign beside him. An evolution has run its course. It is time to bring it to fruition. Time for a new life to be revealed. Every man, when he falls in love, escapes into the forest of Morois. He focuses his whole being on his fantasy of romance, for he believes that in his projection he has found himself and found all the wholeness of life. But unknown to him, he is cut off from the world in the mists of Morois, lost for a time in the fogs of his projections. In Morois Wood, he lives neither with the woman he married nor with Anima, whom he seeks. He lives for a time only with the projection of anima, an image radiant to his eye, yet phantasmal, fading even as he holds her in his arms, only to reappear half hidden among the trees, behind the rock, or in the mists above the water. In this he has no choice, for he is possessed utterly by the love potion. But inevitably comes the moment, in the fullness of time, when the spell is broken. Tristan awakes from a dream of 3 years. He discovers that even in his sleep the king has come to him. The king's tokens of reconciliation put Tristan in mind of the human world, a world he had forgotten. Friendships, interests, work, duty, enthusiasms, people, relationships, all that is outside the enchanted orchard. Tristan decides that he must return the queen to the king, to her life, to her palace hung with fine silks. This is the exact point where a man has, for the first time, a chance to graduate out of his projections and into relationship. The spell is broken. The king comes to claim his own. A new era is dawning if he will see it and accept it. This is the evolution symbolized by the 4. This is the awesome possibility that fate delivers to him. Freed of the potion, a man has the chance to see that the woman he loves and the projections he casts over her are separate realities. He has the opportunity to learn that his projections are really parts of himself, potentialities within him that he has never touched and never known because he has always tried to live them through a woman. This 4th year of Morois yields a double revelation. The withdrawal of romantic projections also gives him the power to see woman as she is, to relate to her and value her as a person rather than the carrier of his lost soul and his unlived life. It opens the possibility of relating to a woman as an individual, as an equal, as a being in her own right. It enables him to begin to know her as she is, in all her complexity, in all her strengths and gifts, so different from his own and yet so necessary for his world. Strangely, most men react to this stage of romantic love, this breaking of the spell, as though it were a great misfortune. It is the crucial point in an evolution, the opening of a wonderful possibility, but somehow he has convinced himself that it is a disaster. When a man's projections of a woman unexpectedly evaporate, he will often announce that he is disenchanted with her. He is disappointed that she is a human being rather than the embodiment of his fantasy. He acts as though she has done something wrong. If he would open his eyes, he would see that the breaking of the spell opens a golden opportunity to discover the real person who is there. It is equally the chance to discover the unknown parts of himself that he has been projecting on her and trying to live through her. Faced with this new era, Tristan reacts as most men do. He bemoans his unhappy fate. Quote, "He will take away the queen. How will I live?" He believes that if he can't have Iseult by projection, then he can't have her at all. The crucial thing to be understood is this. Tristan is not losing a woman, nor is he losing anima. All of this is commotion over one issue. On what level is he going to live with anima? Is he going to retrieve his soul to himself? Is he going to live it as part of his own self? Will he take responsibility for his own unlived life? To return soul to the inner king means exactly that, to begin taking responsibility for living his own soul, rather than delegating that task to a woman. This issue is always painful for the modern man. He is so accustomed to his pattern of trying to live out his unlived self through other people that the prospect of giving it up seems a disaster. He feels that all the joy and intensity of life is contained in the hope that one day a woman will come along who will make him whole and make life perfect. It is hard for him to see that he could live with a woman and be close to her, and yet not try to live his life through her. The issue is equally difficult for women. Many women are ready to rise up in rebellion over being put in the perpetual role of housekeeper, childbearer, and servant, but women object to being made the screen on which men project anima. Our culture trains women that their role is not to be human beings, but to be mirrors who reflect back to a man his ideal or his fantasy. She must struggle to resemble the current Hollywood starlets. She must dress and groom herself and behave in such a way as to make herself into the collective image of anima. She must not be an individual so much as the incarnation of men's fantasy. Many women are so accustomed to this role that they resist any change in the arrangement. They want to go on playing the goddess to a man rather than be a mortal woman. There is something appealing about being worshipped and adored as a divinity, but there is a heavy price attached to this role. The man who sees her as a goddess is not related to her as a woman. He is only related to his own projection, his own inner divinity that he has placed on her. And when his projection lifts, when it migrates away from her to some other woman, then his adoration and his worship will go with it. If he has no relationship to her as one human being to another, then there is nothing left when the projections evaporate. Most people sense this, and so they spend tremendous energy and time trying to find ways to keep the projections going between them, ways to keep the fantasy quality alive between them and to hang on to the feeling of superhuman intensity. When people talk of techniques for keeping the romance in marriage, or keeping the excitement in your relationship, or making sure your spouse stays in love with you, they are assuming that the only possible basis for a relationship must be the projections. They assume that once the projections are allowed to evaporate, there will be no more basis for a relationship or marriage. So most techniques for saving marriages turn out to be techniques for manipulating projections and keeping them alive. It does not occur to modern Western people that a relationship could be made between two ordinary mortal human beings, that they could love each other as ordinary, imperfect people, and could simply allow the projections to evaporate. Yet this is what is required. Ultimately, the only enduring relationships will be between couples who consent to see each other as ordinary, imperfect people, and who love each other without illusion and without inflated expectations. Projections are a law unto themselves. We can manipulate them. We can artificially stimulate them and keep them alive for a certain time. But there always comes a point at which the symbolic 3 years have passed. The spell of the love potion is broken. The projections lift. At that point, we are all Tristans, standing in Morois with an issue to face and some choices to make. If a man graduates correctly out of the forest of Morois, it opens up a new world for him. He discovers that there are parts of himself, potentialities and forces that he can't live out through a woman. He discovers that he can't make woman the carrier of all his unlived life and his unrealized self. He finds that there are things that he must do himself and for himself. He must have an inner life. He must serve values that have meaning for him. He must have interests and enthusiasms that well out of his own soul, that are not merely spin-offs of his life with woman. This is the naked sword that Tristan places between himself and Isolde. It is the consciousness of his own individuality, of his own life, distinct from the life he leads with woman. To do this does not hurt his relationship with woman. On the contrary, it makes relationship possible. As he relieves his woman of the burden of carrying his soul for him, it becomes possible for the first time to see her as a woman, to relate to her in her individuality, her specialness, and her humanity. He realizes that she also has to be an individual. must have her own life and her own reason for being. Neither can she project all of herself onto him, nor live her life through him, nor spend the rest of her life as a foil for his unlived self. An awesome potential is at stake in this evolution. It is the potential for being fully individual, while also relating genuinely to a fellow human being. It is by leaving the forest of Morois, by returning Isolde to the king, by putting his own soul back inside him, that a man wakes up to the fact of his individuality. In becoming aware that there is a part of himself that can't be lived through another person, for which he must take responsibility on his own, he awakens to the unexpected extensity and complexity of his individual self. In turn, as he awakens to his own uniqueness, he becomes capable of relating directly to a woman in her individuality. The test of true individuation is that it includes the capacity to relate to another person and to respect him or her as an individual. Unfortunately, it is exactly at this point in our evolution, where our possibilities are richest, that most people miss their opportunity. Refusing to graduate from Morois, they instead find some winding path that will lead them back into the forest meadows of their own projections. When a man realizes that he has been trying to live his life through another person, he usually misses the true implications and jumps to the wrong conclusions. He begins talking about separating from his wife in order to find himself. He thinks of all the things he hasn't done during their marriage. He wants to have a purpose in life. He wants to realize some goals, for he feels that life is slipping away from him. He wants to go back to school, start a new career, improve himself, go on a diet, go places he has failed to go, and do things he had failed to do. If he ever looked at these ideals objectively, he could see that he can do most of these things perfectly well within his marriage or his relationship. He doesn't have to invent an either-or proposition, either my individuation or my marriage. The reason he hasn't done these things is neither that he is married nor that his wife stands in his way. The true reason is that he hasn't had the self-discipline or imagination to do them for himself. He has expected his wife to live his unlived life for him. He has expected her to complete his life and make it whole without his having to help himself. Then, on the day when he suddenly realizes that he is incomplete, that he is unfulfilled, that he is doing nothing about his own development, he blames her rather than himself. He says she is standing in his way, dragging him down, preventing him from being himself. This attitude only perpetuates the cycles of projection. It leads back into the fogs and bogs of Morois wood. A man who takes this approach usually breaks up his relationship, makes proclamations about how he is going to change his life on his own, and then goes looking for another woman who will solve all his problems and make his life complete, effortlessly. He settles back into his rut of trying to live his unconscious self through a woman. He has changed the woman, but the pattern is the same, and it leads to the same way of life. His individuality turns out to be an invasion, a circular path back into the woods. If this man had stayed in his relationship or his marriage and taken responsibility for developing his individuality there, then he could have faced the issue squarely. Our desperate need is to realize that we need both qualities in life. We need individuality, and we also need relationship to a particular person. We can't have one at the expense of the other. No man can be fully an individual unless he is fully related, and his capacity for genuine relatedness grows in proportion as he becomes a complete individual. These two aspects of life are yoked together by a deep and ancient bond, for they are really two sides of the same archetype, two faces of the same reality. This, then, is the great evolution that becomes possible in the 4th year of Morois, in the breaking of the spell. It is this marvelous potential for making a synthesis between individuality and relationship, for evolving out of the illusory conflict between these two powerful energies within us and living them in the unity of one human life. Tristan is called to sacrifice. He thinks he is asked to sacrifice both anima and woman, but he is not. He is called only to sacrifice a way of approaching anima and a way of approaching woman. He is called to give up his precious claim to the right to live his soul by projection. He is called to give up his demand that woman bear his unconscious for him. If he could make that sacrifice and make it cleanly, he would discover that what he thinks he lost will be returned to him. His soul will be returned to him as an inner experience, and he will find that there is another Iseult, a mortal woman, who has been waiting for him all along, outside the forest of Morois, just beyond the mists of his projective world. This is the law of sacrifice. If a man will truly give up that which he possesses on the wrong level, it will be returned to him on a right level. If he will give up trying to live Iseult the Fair on the wrong level, he will find her returned to him on a correct and workable level. In fact, his bounty will be doubled, for he will find that there are two Iseults, each to be experienced in her own way. One is Iseult, the image of his soul. The other is Iseult, the woman. Unfortunately, Tristan fails his sacrifice. At the last moment, his masculinity and his resolution are too weak. He makes a secret arrangement with Iseult that he will stay nearby and meet her secretly. He takes her ring of green jasper as a token of her pledge to run to him any time he calls, to again betray the king. He reserves to himself the right to put her back into the world of projection, to put their relationship back on the same old level, to start anew the cycles of intrigue, secret meetings, broken vows, and betrayals. If Tristan would keep his word, if he would make a clean sacrifice, he could elevate his relationship with Iseult to a new level. But he renounces the sacrifice. He makes a secret exception, and the evolution is aborted. The symbol of that incomplete sacrifice is the ring of green jasper, for by that ring they seal their agreement to undo the sacrifice. We shall soon see what terrible tricks that green jasper ring will play before our story is ended. It is every man's fate to reach a point in his life at which the spell is broken and he is called out of the forest of Morois. It is a time of decision and of sacrifice. The king calls us forth to make a new way of life with Iseult the Fair and a new way of life with woman. When dealing with archetypal material like that portrayed in this myth, it is good to remember that an ideal is being expressed that may not always be translated directly into practical life. Just as the Roman view on contraception, the traditional view of divorce, and monogamy are ideal statements from which culture may take its guidelines, so also is the mythological ideal presented in Tristan and Iseult, a lofty view that may not always be possible in the give and take of human affairs. A note from the I Ching is encouraging at this point. In China, monogamy is formally the rule, and every man has but one official wife. This marriage is less the concern of the two participants than of their families, is contracted with strict observance of forms, but the husband retains the right also to indulge his more personal inclinations. Of course, it is a most difficult and delicate matter, requiring tact on the part of everyone concerned, but under favorable circumstances, this represents the solution of a problem for which European culture has failed to find an answer. Needless to say, the ideal set for woman in China is achieved no oftener than is the European ideal. I Ching, page 209. From this delicate observation from ancient China, we take courage that an ideal is a lofty beacon, but one not always attained.